Broadcasting from Orchard Park, New York,
and Boca Raton, Florida,
it's the Freight 360 podcast. From freight broker sales tips to sports talk, this podcast is all about helping you grow as a freight broker. We're your hosts, Nate Cross
and Benjamin Kowalski.
Let's talk freight. Welcome back. It's another episode of the Freight 360 podcast. Happy Halloween. This will be dropping on November 1st, so Halloween will be just behind us, but we're going to talk about what's the wording, Ben? The spookiest things that happen in freight brokerage?
Spookiest stuff to happen in freight brokerage. We need some good intro music, like Halloween or something, if we could plug that in the beginning.
I should have gotten it all queued up in the sound effects, but oh well. But hey, if you're brand new, this is a good, fun episode, a little lighthearted today. Make sure to check out all of our other content at freight360.net. There's a whole searchable library, so if you're helping train your team or if you're trying to self-train, go in there. You can search prospecting, sales, carrier stuff, claims. You'll find the relevant content for whatever you're looking for. And while you're there, check out the Freight Broker Basics course. That's our full-length educational option to help get you off the ground and start your brokerage. It's also been a really good tool for folks to help train their staff when they're growing out their team within their brokerage company. Share this with your friends, leave the reviews, the comments, the questions, all that good stuff. We answer as many as we can on every Tuesday's edition of The Final Mile. Ben, it was good seeing you, man. We got to hang out this past weekend in Florida, down in Epcot.
It was nice. Yeah.
Had some margaritas in Mexico and made our way to Germany, I believe. But
yeah, I think I made it all the way to Germany with you guys. I think Arthur and I, we started at England, I think, on the other side, made it all the way to Mexico, missed you, and then came back, and then went back to Mexico, and then made it all. I was exhausted by the end of the day, to be honest.
Yeah, we had every country except for we had a little bit of a hiccup in France. So if anybody's ever been to Epcot, there's I think there's 11 countries, and you can get like food or a drink in each country. We got to the point where I was splitting it with my wife. I couldn't
it's a lot of sugar.
Drink the whole thing. I mean, it was a matter of time and how much my stomach could hold. And those drinks weren't all big, but yeah. But we ended up having an issue in France with. We'll say there was an incident with a lady on a scooter. So we ended up leaving France and coming back that night. So yeah, she didn't like the fact that there was my family and my brother's family with 9 people and 2 strollers in her way, and she had some words to say to us. So
ran into a couple instances of those.
Moved on.
Yeah, it's all you can do in that scenario.
Yep, but it was good. It's always good to travel and get to hang out and have fun and get together with you. Sports. So I was way wrong on the World Series. So I was like, yeah, it's going to be Yankees. They're going to probably win it
Dodgers
4-1.
take it.
They lost it 4-1. So Dodgers looked amazing. Freddie Freeman, first baseman, used to play for the Braves. I think he was labeled the MVP for the World Series, but he set a record for hitting a walk-off grand slam in Game 1, and it was insane. And then the Dodgers took Games 1 and 2. Yanks took, I think, Game 1, 2, and 3, and then Yanks took 4, and then Wednesday night, so it was last night this week, the Dodgers squeaked out 5 runs in a single inning after they were down 4-0 and ended up taking the win. I think it was 6-5 or something like that, but they won it in 5 games. So congratulations, all the Dodgers fans, Yankees fans. Sorry. There's always next year.
It is.
Yeah. Sports, Bills, got to watch them from Florida. Had a nice game against Seattle. Nice, dominant blowout win for the Bills again. Who did the Steelers play this week?
Yeah, Steelers played Monday night. We played against the Giants. Ended up definitely won. I can't remember what the score was. Looked pretty good. I missed the end of the game. I couldn't stay up that late, but caught the recap. Russell Wilson looked a ton of yards, had a horrible time actually scoring. I mean, literally drove down the field the first 4 possessions and just couldn't get a touchdown. So
that's the game that was like all field goals at first, right? Wasn't it
yeah,
like
all
3-0,
field goals,
3-3, 6-3,
Yes.
6-6, 9-6?
And there were two touchdowns called back for penalties too. Like Steelers had one called back, and then they had a second. I don't know if it was the first or the second one that was called back. Pickens caught the ball, got blasted, but he never got his left foot down. In fact, his right foot touched down twice. He must have moved 3 or 4 yards through the end zone and just never got his left foot down, and then they called that one back.
Yep. In news, I mean, I guess election day is next week, Tuesday.
Yes.
So get out there and vote. Do your civic duty, right? There's a ton. I mean, this is like the big one. You got the presidential, you got Congress, House and Senate. You've got a lot of local and state level. I think so it's funny, my wife's cousin is running for district attorney. He's running for re-election. He's like the interim right now because his boss stepped down earlier this year. So he's running for DA. So if you're in Erie County, vote for Mike Kane. But it's because it's such a big ballot this year, and a lot of times people just vote like party line, and he's like, I think like the 13th or 14th person you have to vote for. So he had to like campaign like extra hard so people know who he is. Otherwise, a lot of times you're like, yeah, I don't know who this person is. You just party line. But yeah, big election. So we'll see what it means for the freight industry. Probably not a whole lot. Everyone, the economy doesn't necessarily align 100% with the freight market as we've seen the last year or two. But you could see some regulatory shifts or policy moves that could impact our industry. So
there was an interesting correlation between sports and the election. I had heard that, I don't know how many elections, but it was significant. I don't remember the past 10 or 20 years. The last home game of what were the Washington Redskins, right? Now the Commanders.
Yep.
If they won the last home game before the election, the incumbent won. When they've lost, the opponent won. So, and if you watch that game Sunday, literally they ended up winning the game in like the last handful of seconds with like a long bomb jump ball, and they were talking about it on Sunday or Monday.
Talk about the Hail Mary.
Yeah. That Hail Mary, they said, could have been the decider of the election because if that holds true.
Interesting. So that would say the incumbent, which I guess it's not really the incumbent, but it'd be the Democratic.
Well, the incumbent party, I guess.
Okay, incumbent party, got it. Well, we'll see. We'll see if that Hail Mary holds on or if not, but we shall see. Any other news? I feel like I was on vacation for a week, so I unplugged.
I'm out of
yes. I got nothing. Cool. Well, we're gonna talk about the spookiest things that can happen in freight brokerage. Just a nice little lighthearted. There we go. Lighthearted discussion. We'll tell some horror stories. Hopefully, give you some practical tips to prevent them, so you can learn from our mistakes and not deal with it yourselves. So yeah, I mean, let's get right into it, Ben. What do you got?
So here's where I was thinking and where this came from, right? And this was someone on a team that I work with a company, and I'm tied into the emails and communications, right? And it was somebody newer, right? And why this kicked off is like, there was like the customer emailed about something kind of trivial, like, hey, can you make sure this gets done this way? I can't remember if it was like at a pickup appointment detail or if it was a detail related to something, but it was like very commonplace for someone that's been in the industry for a while. But you could tell by the way they were writing the emails, they were just freaking out. Like, oh my gosh, we're going to lose this customer if we don't do this. You need this level of anxiety, right? And what really kind of hit me was I'm like, I used to do that. Like in the first 6 months to a year where I was a broker, like I would get so worried anytime something happened that I thought I was going to lose a whole customer, a portion of my book of business. And it's like, over time, you get more used to it and you realize like, this is just part of the industry, right? Like the thing that is absolutely, the only thing predictable is the fact that things are going to go wrong. Maybe
Yep.
not every day, but maybe every week for sure. Sometimes multiple times a day. And like, this is just the industry we're in. And I'm like, this is a pretty good topic because there are lots of things that are inherently scary when you are starting in this industry. And even when you've been in it a while, because you never really kind of know what's going to happen in some of these scenarios, no matter what you do.
Yeah. I'm trying to think. Someone always, they put it a certain way to me. It was like, just plan to be surprised or something like that. And you make a good point. One of the best traits you can have or skill sets you can develop as a broker or just anyone working in brokerage, because whether it's accounting or operation sales, you're going to have some kind of hiccup that you didn't expect. But the skill set you can work on is just being very flexible, right? Being able to overcome adversity and keep a level head when things go awry. Like, if you guys follow our Q&A session that comes out on Tuesdays, one of our questions that we're going to answer this week or this coming Tuesday is on, how to handle heated conversations on the phone with a carrier. But yeah, keep yourself cool, calm, collect. I'm going to start off with a story. I might have told this a few years ago, but this one goes back like 10 years. I was working at a previous brokerage, and this was somebody else whose story that I overheard. And but everyone at the company went nuts. So basically, the shipment was an excavator, but like a smaller one, like you would use, or someone would come to your house and maybe dig out to do a patio or something like that. Just kind of move some dirt around. And the shipment never shows up wherever it's supposed to go. And days go by, they can't get a hold of the carrier. The carrier's not answering the phone. Finally, a week later, the excavator gets delivered. And it was brand new when they picked it up, and now it's been used. It's got dirt on it and stuff like that. They come to find out the driver took it to his house and dug a hole in his backyard for a pool for days on end. And I don't remember exactly how they figured it all out that that's what happened, whether he had admitted it or if there was eyewitness accounts or whatever. But literally the driver, and this is before all the tools we use now for tracking and location identity verification, all this stuff we use now, right? The quick scopes and the trucker tools and the everything. But yeah, just decided, I'm gonna go dig a pool in my backyard while I have a chance to. Last week we talked about loadouts and how you can use an empty trailer for a week or whatever before you deliver it. That's not how it works with, you don't get to load out and utilize an excavator when you're hauling it as a driver. So that was an interesting one that had happened. I don't know how it panned out. If there was a claim or I don't know, but that was a wild one.
Yeah. I mean, and I can imagine everybody was freaking out, and this is sometimes just stuff that happens.
Yep.
I'll
give you another one. This one's not as fun, but we're actually dealing with it right now. And this is this goes to trying to figure out who's at who's to blame, right? The old meme of Spider-Man. Is it Spider-Man? They're all pointing at each other, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we have one of our agents has an issue. Right now, it's the carrier is basically saying I need you to pay me for X, Y, and Z. I think basically here's what happened. Customer is a middleman. So the customer is not the shipper or the receiver, right? They're the one just coordinating the shipment. There is, I believe, Amazon warehouse was involved, and some other big company was involved in either the shipper or the receiver. But driver gets to the delivery.
In freight, time is money, and efficiency is key. That's where Levity comes in. Imagine automating your email operations to do more with less effort. Levity connects directly to your inboxes, extracting vital information from emails and attachments in real time. It seamlessly integrates with your TMS, empowering you to quote faster, build loads more efficiently, and book more freight in less time. Whether it's incoming emails from shippers or carriers, Levity's got you covered. It understands any language, any format, and even interprets non-standard formatting. Visit levity.ai today to sign up and get started.
Tired of struggling to find accurate rates and the right carriers for your freight? With DAT1, you can access more than 500 million posted loads and trucks every year. That's 3 times more capacity than any other load board. Plus, their integrated freight management system makes it easy to cover loads 24/7. They have the most trusted network of carriers, brokers, and shippers in the country. You'll get real-time rates on every lane so you know exactly how much a shipment will cost before you commit to it. Plus, you get instant access to top bids from qualified carriers around the country. Get 10% off your first year of DAT1 when you visit the link in the show notes.
And basically gets rejected. And we don't know if the appointment time was set, if it was an error on the broker, an error on the carrier, an error on the shipper, the receiver, the customer. No one knows who's at fault here. But now you've got a receiver or a driver who's pissed off, wants money, is going to refuse to deliver it. And we're trying to calm him down and say hey, until we get this figured out, can you just get it offloaded somewhere, nearby at a warehouse or something, and we'll get it squared away. We'll get you taken care of. But then you get in the situation where the driver kind of walks that fine line of hostage load if they don't do anything, but then they're also worried where's my money? And I feel we answered a similar question like this from our Q&A session a few weeks back, but that's one that we're dealing with right now. And believe it or not, those situations happen almost every week where you've got miscommunication, somebody dropped the ball and no one wants to take the admission of oh, that was on me, my bad, we'll get it rescheduled, we'll comp you for your time and the pay and all that stuff. But those are the things that if you don't do your double and triple check all the way down the line, and I'm talking appointment times and verifying points of contact and all of that good stuff, it can get really messy really fast.
Yeah, it reminds me of it. And I've told this story before, and I'm going to try to remember as many of the details as I can. But this was a load, and it was going over a holiday weekend. It was a 3-day weekend, I remember, in January. And this was a shipment. It was a $500,000 shipment. So for sure, way more expensive. And this is also 9-10 years ago, right? So a lot of money for a shipment. And it was going to a really important customer. It was going to, I think it was the Canadian military or Canadian law force. And these were all Motorola communication devices. I don't know if they were walkie-talkies, whatever they were, that's what it was that was going there. But it was in the winter, and it was going to the island off of the East Coast. And I don't remember the name of that island.
Prince Edward Island?
Yeah, probably Prince Edward Island, right? So we booked this load on Friday. It had to deliver, I think, on the holiday, on Monday. And the carriers were going up there. And once they got onto the island, they said, oh, there's too much snow. The road's blocked. We have to take this load back. And we're well, we can't. It has to deliver. There's probably another road. We're trying to coordinate and giving them some options. And then they basically said, no, we're taking this back to our yard. And I'm freaking out. So I'm I think I'm going to lose the customer. This thing has to deliver. They assured us it was fine. We were talking to I don't know if it was either we were looking up the weather or we were getting and reaching out to see if these roads were closed, calling the Department of Transportation. No, the roads are fine. Drivers are telling us they can't go. So they turn around. But then they held the load hostage and said, oh, because they knew it needed to deliver. So they wanted us to pay another few $1,000s to take it back to the yard. And I'm I can't, I'm going to lose a customer. I certainly can't pay an extra $2,000-$3,000 to take this back to the yard, right? And at the time I worked for a big brokerage, and I remember I'm on with was an ops team that you call on certain scenarios that help walk you through how to handle these things that are outside of normal situations, right?
Yeah.
And I remember what they advised is they said, listen, this is clear. I don't know. It wasn't extortion that they used, but it was under duress that they're forcing you to increase this rate con, not in good faith. And they were make sure everything's recorded. You're writing down what's happening as it's happening. The calls are recorded as well. And they said, you know what?
I think extortion's a good word. That's the word that we use. Yeah.
And they said, you know what? Just send the rate con at the end of the day because we're going to fight this later. Give them what they need to protect the shipment. Okay, so I upped the rate con another $3,000. They take it back to the yard. But then they said that they either couldn't get it to their yard or they needed to have it repowered to another carrier's yard because they couldn't get it to their yard for whatever reason. Or they said they didn't have the security and did it again. An extra $3,000-$4,000 they wanted to take it to this other carrier's yard. And we had no idea where this yard was, couldn't verify, didn't know if there was security. So same thing, pay it again, right? Until I remember, like, this Raycon had to be like $12,000 for a lane that should have been like, I don't know, $4,000, right? And at the end of the day, like, how it played out was we didn't pay any of those overages. We ended up negotiating a rate in good faith for what was actually delivered. Yep. But it was also another nightmare trying to get the trailer back out and get the product there the next week. And it reminded me of like a few things. One, it scared the shit out of me because like I wasn't in the office, so I'm doing this like while I was literally in the car sometimes on my cell phone trying to coordinate this. I'm terrified I'm going to lose this huge customer of ours, as well as maybe losing the cargo and having no idea what this is going to cause. And it was like the first probably 7 months I was in the job. It's like one of my first large shipments for a very large customer that I worked for months to get. And I'm like, I'm basically playing chutes and ladders. Like, this goes wrong, I'm going to go all the way back to the beginning and have nothing to work on and have to start, fight, might lose my job. I'm losing this customer, freaking out, panicked the whole weekend. And like the takeaways at the end of the day were everybody gets really upset when these things are happening. The customer, right? The receiver sometimes. The receiver's yelling at the customer who's calling you, yelling at you. And then all of this boils over. Then you're frustrated. The driver, in some cases, is just trying to do their best job. In this case, they weren't. They were trying to just get us for as much money as they could. But the biggest takeaway was once all this played out, like everything was just okay. Like a day after it got delivered, receiver didn't really care much that it was a few days late. The shipper didn't have any issue using us again because we communicated all of it as it was happening. And at the end of the day, all of this emotion and all this wasted energy and all this freaking out got me nowhere but making it harder for me to actually get the job done. To your point, focusing on just working through it step by step. And nothing bad really happened, like at the end of the day. And it's like, I think a lot of people go through this. I for sure did a lot in the first year in business. And it's like almost every one of those scenarios where I was terrified, thought I'd lose a customer, thought I was going to lose my job or I was going to have to go figure something else out. Like I ended up getting more business on the other end because when something gets really stressful and people are freaking out, the only thing they want is information. They know you can't control a lot of these scenarios. They know that there are things that happen. Like they go through this too. But when they're getting yelled at, they're just yelling at you because that's the emotion they're getting from someone else and it just flows to you. Then it flows to the driver. Then it makes it all of it harder to work through in the first place. And it's like the biggest lesson I learned through going through all of those is that most of them work out anyway, as long as you communicate and you work through it step by step, trying to make the best decision you can. And they don't have to be right. Sometimes you'll make a decision that you could have done differently the next time that would have worked out better. But if you are just constantly communicating with what is happening, they almost always work out and you almost always end up with a better relationship because now the customer you've proven to them, you've showed them that their biggest fear, and their biggest fear is almost always the same thing. Something's going to go wrong and you're not going to tell them. That's what they're scared about. And when they go through a stressful situation and they know that you do everything and that you can, and you communicate it as it's happening, they tend to trust you far more with more of their business later. Because it's not that they're expecting you to do it perfectly. They're just expecting you to communicate what's happening as it's happening. They're not looking for perfection. Yeah, they get frustrated when things don't go right, but at the end of the day, that's not the thing that usually matters, perfection.
Yeah, I think it's, like you said, when your back's up against the wall and things are going wrong, that's when like your true colors will show. Whether you're calm and you're going to give all the relevant information to your customer, or if you're going to be that guy or girl that just kind of avoids picking up the phone, doesn't want to give true updates. I always say it's best to just address the elephant in the room and give the bad news. Like we've said it before, like bad news gets worse with time. So like get the bad news out there right away. And at least now we know what we're working with. Because you might have this great idea like, oh, I'm just going to wait until I get a good update and then I'll go back to my customer and let them know that. But if you give them the bad news, they might have a solution for you that you otherwise would never know about. So, yeah.
And I mean, this stuff happens. I mean, it still happens. It happened last week to me. I had a bunch of loads that missed pickup appointments, missed deliveries. The customer was upset. But the one thing I do now that's very different is like, as soon as I get that information, I pick up the phone and have that conversation. Because I've noticed that like if you do it over the phone, One, it's usually received differently. Two, it's like, I don't know, if something bad happens and someone sends me a text message instead of calling me, and they always usually call me, now I kind of feel like they're hiding behind it as opposed to standing up and just owning up to it and letting me know what's happening. And that drives me nuts. Like, it drives me nuts too. Like, if I've been working with a carrier for a long time, like, I'll have this conversation often, especially if I'm using a carrier a lot and I'm trying to get them more business. Like, I had to do this with a new dispatcher with one of my carriers. I had this conversation. I'm like, listen, I don't care what happens. Like, things are going to go wrong. I know they're going to go wrong, but I need you not to be scared to tell me what's happening. If you can't reach a driver, if they are broken down, like, the sooner you tell me, the sooner I can go and work to fix this with you. But if you wait and just ignore my email and then just respond to me 3 hours later, like, I have no clue what's going on. And then the customer gets more upset. At least if the information is passing, right? Whatever it is. And I think a lot of times carriers are also scared to tell you, oh, I'm still stuck at my receiver and I know I'm supposed to be at that appointment in an hour. And they just don't tell you and arrive 2 hours later and then hope it's okay. Well, if you told me, I can probably call them and maybe work in another appointment and make your life easier so you don't got to wait to be working for 6 hours.
That's a great point, because oftentimes, and it's not that it's more so this way or another way, but a lot of times you can't get information from the carrier to give to your customer. And I know I've told this story before, but we had one maybe like 3 years ago. Driver would not answer their phone.
Have you fallen victim to double brokering, cargo theft, or identity theft? QuickScope stands out as the only load-level fraud protection tool available today. Unlike any other solution on the market, QuickScope is deployed post-agreement between shippers or brokers and carriers. Shippers can rest assured that their cargo remains secure. Brokers can confidently confirm the identity of the individuals on site for pickup, and carriers can trust that they'll receive timely payment. Start your free trial with QuickScope today by visiting them online at quickscope.com. That's QUIKSKOPE.com. Blue Book Services is the resource you need if you're transporting fresh produce or lumber. Their online databases contain thousands of companies throughout the produce and lumber industry supply chains. You can easily search their databases to generate new sales leads. Blue Book's credit ratings help you avoid companies with high credit risk, and their team can help resolve disputed loads. To learn more, go to producebluebook.com or lumberbluebook.com and click Join Today.
Dispatcher's like, oh yeah, he's parked at whatever truck stop or highway rest area on I-90, and I'm like, oh, that's like 40 minutes from my house. So like the morning goes by and we still can't get a hold of this driver, but the dispatcher like insists, oh yeah, they're at this place, they're broken down, waiting on maintenance, whatever. And in my head, I'm like, okay, that's either true or they're nowhere near there and they're using that as an excuse to stall and buy time because maybe they threw another partial on this truck or maybe something else happened, right? So finally, like, the customer's like, we have a meeting with the board in like 2 hours and we need to get an update and we can't verify. Like, we need to know something. So I drive out to the truck stop and I went on both sides, like the eastbound and the westbound, and I checked every single truck, every single MC number, and not there. So like we ended up like calling out the carrier on it, being like, the dispatcher, like, hey, we sent someone to that location, the truck's not there. And they finally were like, okay, well, here's what's really going on. But that stuff it's wild because as it starts to progress, like normally like you hear like, yeah, I can't get a hold of the driver. And it's like, yeah, well, this happens all the time. And then you're like, okay, still can't get a hold of the driver. Yep. And it's like, all right, now the customer is like getting antsy with me. All right, now the dispatcher's giving me a runaround. Okay, now the customer's freaking out. And then next thing you know, it snowballs and everyone starts going nuts. But the main thing is like, we did nothing wrong, right? We did as much due diligence as possible to give that customer as accurate and timely information as possible. And that's the best we can do. And ultimately, the truck got there. They were there late for whatever reason. I forget what it was. But the customer gives you a lot of respect for going above and beyond. Like, who else is going to send somebody in there, hop in a car, drive down the road, and go to this truck stop, right? Not very common. So, yeah, you'll get some points with customers that way. Another one, and I think I've probably highlighted this in other scenarios before, but using the wrong equipment type and trying to take shortcuts. So the propane tank story, do you remember this one?
I love this one. Worth retelling.
This is I think this was onions, and it was in the colder months of the year. And I think the onions were coming out of somewhere like in the Northwest, right? So was supposed to have a reefer with the temp setting to be, the heat on to keep it above freezing, right? Because we don't want the product to freeze and then be damaged and have a claim. So what do they do as a workaround? They don't have a reefer? Oh, just get one of those portable propane tanks and throw it in the back of your vented van and, keep it above freezing. What could go wrong here? And we come to find out this was going on for a while, and, you don't get caught until something goes wrong, right?
Yep.
But those portable propane tanks, they have like a safety on them where if they tip over, it has an auto shut off, right? And picture like you've probably seen all kinds of them where they're like a propane tank, either like the long tube that shoots out like the heat, or it's like a radiant thing with a blower on it. They can heat up like a garage or anything like really good. But yeah, like you got to think semi-truck, like it's not the smoothest ride all the time. It's bouncing back and forth. You hit a bump, you turn the wrong way, and boom, the thing tips over. Next thing you know, the product shows up frozen naturally, and big claim, and insurance is not going to cover that one. So I think there was like two of them that we dealt with, and it ended up the total claim value was like $160,000 across all of the product.
Wow.
Yeah. So yeah, no good. It was probably more than two. It was probably like 4 or 5. I don't remember exactly, but yeah, it was because you don't have the entire product wasn't damaged, but we found out this was going on for like a very long time, and all these things keep you get damaged product, frozen product showing up, and then you find out like these were vented vans, not reefer units. So yeah, don't do that, right? I've also seen the wrong equipment type where they're like, it's got to go on a specific open deck type, and then the broker asks, all right, well, what's the dimensions? Or the carrier's like, oh, what are the dimensions? Oh yeah, that'll fit on mine. And then you come to find out like it wasn't about the dimensions, it was about X, Y, and Z at loading or unloading based on that equipment type and the crane needed and whatever. Conestoga is a great example. Like, it's got to be a Conestoga because it has to be able to have the skirts open on the side and side load it with a forklift.
To side load it.
Right? So yeah, there's been too many of those where they try to take a shortcut and use the wrong equipment type. Sometimes they get away with it, but oftentimes they don't. So those are not fun.
Yeah, and when you get caught for doing something like that, it's really hard to walk back any rationale because you're clearly doing whatever you want to in these scenarios.
Well, I'll give you one that's on the customer. I've used this story in the TIA class many times about legal and ethics and things like that. We had a shipment, I believe it was flowers. It was something agricultural, and it was going into California. And the customer knew that there was a certain certification that they needed to have for the product, that if they hit an inspection point in California, they didn't have it, and they would have gotten a fine for it. So what do? They tell our broker, hey, send the driver in this alternative route. They're going to skip the inspection point. So it's kind of like telling a driver, like, hey, hop on at exit or exit whatever, you'll skip the way station. Like, I've dealt with that all the time in on the trucking side, and it's the wrong way to do business, but drivers like tell each other that, like, oh yeah, if you're overweight, don't worry, like you can go around here. So they're trying to, like, the customer, because you got to think, they're the shipper and their receiver is their customer, and they want to get their product delivered on time with no fines, etc. So they're like, just go in this way, Mr. Broker, like, tell your driver to go in here. And eventually we're like, they brought it out to us, and they're like, are we allowed to do this? We're like, no. Like, not only is that unethical, like, you're knowingly, like, abiding and breaking a law. Like, as silly as some of the rules in California might be to some folks, you have to follow them if you're going to do business there. It's just the way that things work. So we ended up saying like, nope, turn around, send the driver back to the shipper. They've got to get their paperwork in place. It'd be like, I mean, if you take that on a more broad scale, that'd be like not having your customs paperwork and trying to smuggle the freight from Mexico into the U.S., like Fast and Furious style. No.
You know what that reminded me of? It reminded me of I didn't end up moving this shipment, but I still remember the pictures of it to this day. It was a rocket engine that was going from an Air Force base in Utah. I don't remember which Air Force base is up there, but it was going from there and it was going to Cape Canaveral for a launch, right? And I remember because like you bid on lots of these when you're doing work with the military. You get bids all the time. But I remember this one because like it was so heavy when this was again when I worked at a big company. So I was like asking other people, I'm like, you know, at this weight, I don't know what trailer you can put this on because it was this heavy, right? I think, and I remembered that like I had to work to quote a 13 axle trailer, which I found out like there were only like dozens of them available in the country. And like you schedule them ahead of time. They're not like somebody you can call and just get this trailer available, right? Because they're huge. They mostly use them for like these windmills and things. And this quote for this engine, right? Like it was over $100,000. It was like 115 or 120 grand to move this engine. And I think it had to go to Cali first. I think it had to go to California and then to Florida for some reason to like get checked at this Air Force base and then over to here. So super long run, crazy expensive trailer, a lot of scheduling. You needed all these routings like done to make sure where it could drive, what roads it could take and everything. And I remember talking to the guy at the TO at the base, and I went, you know, like, this is roughly where this is falling. And I'm like, I had like little margin in it because it was like such a large bill. Like you can't put 15% on $115,000. I mean, I guess you could, but
you
like
could. I've seen it happen before. Not on 115K, but I've seen it on like 60K.
But it was huge. And like the punchline of the story that reminded me of the heater was they sent me a picture and they went, oh, the other quote we got's for like 35 grand. And I'm like, how did you get a quote for 30? I'm like, I can't get a trailer for less than like, it was like 95 grand. And with the pilot cars and everything else, it ended up being whatever. I'm like, how in the world are you getting quotes this low? And he's like, oh, I'll send you pictures of how they moved it last time. They're going to do it the same way. And what they did was they basically welded pins and other things to a chassis for a drayage load, right? And they put this on a chassis and then chained it to this thing.
Oh my gosh.
And I was like, I remember asking the guy, I was like, yeah, but like this weighs so much. How in the world are you going to transport this much weight on this small of a trailer? And they basically just said, well, this is how they did it last time. And they want us to go with the cheapest quote. And that's how we're going to move it. And like in the back of my head, I'm just thinking like, this is like in violation of every regulation to move this for weight, let alone the safety. And the kicker was like, it was super expensive. Like it was for sure in like the tens of millions of dollars in value.
More,
if not hundreds of millions. Like it was so expensive. And they basically said, oh, well, we're going to self-insure it. And I'm thinking like, who's insuring this thing? It's basically chained to the back of a trailer that looks like a landscaping trailer. Like you'd see somebody put a refrigerator on the back of and like just chain it to it. I'm like, and you're going to insure this like hundreds of millions of dollar engine to this thing this way to save $40,000?
I think $100 million might be a stretch, but either way,
whatever it was, expensive. It was some ridiculous number on what it was.
I remember we had
stuff happens
a couple years ago, and this was another broker, which because of their mistakes allowed us to get more business. And luckily nothing went wrong, but their shortcuts were basically brought to light. So we had like $20-some million valued equipment, and it's in the energy sector. And like we quote, and then we're like, man, why is our pricing so high? We're like, come to find out, I think it was TQL. It was who was actually winning these bids. Mm-hmm. They weren't insuring the equipment, and these were like oversized, heavy haul. And I think the one was worth like $23 million. And they're just like, yeah, we're, just hope nothing goes wrong here. And nothing did, but when they found, when they're asking us, like, where's your pricing coming from? And we're adding in, like, yeah, this is like the insurance alone on this costs X amount. And like carriers, it's really hard for us to ask them to go get this quoted. So we buy it ourselves through a third party just for this shipment, and you are the insured party on it. And then they're like, I wonder if these other guys are doing that. And they go and ask them, and they're like, they end up finding out like they weren't adding insurance to any of these loads. Luckily, nothing went wrong. But yeah, that's a huge disaster waiting to happen. Imagine a total wreck of like, $20-some million. I even remember, and this is like not within insurance, but like total losses on freight. We had a customer, Dave. I don't know why I remember this vividly, but like October 1st was the day that we started moving freight with them, and it was October 4th. It was like the fourth day. We had a total loss, like burn, like it lit on fire and like burned the whole trailer, burned all of the freight. Luckily, it was insured and handled and all of that, but it was just like, what are the odds that like day 4 that the truck just blows up basically and you have a total loss? But those are the headaches. And again, the way that you respond to those adverse situations goes to show what kind of work you're going to do for your customer, what kind of headaches you can handle for them so they're not dealing with them, by themselves. So
I had that same thing happen to me. I think I've told this story, but we had a shipment. It was a very long time ago, but I was moving. It was insulated steel coil on a flatbed, and we couldn't get a hold of the driver. It was like Friday or Saturday. So like all weekend we were calling the dispatcher, and the dispatcher couldn't get a hold of the driver. And the driver was an older gentleman, I remember, because he was in his mid 70s. And I remember talking to the dispatcher, and I could tell she was like absolutely concerned, right? Like this was not a situation where it seemed like from the tone of her voice that she was, just telling me what we needed to hear. And it got to the point on Sunday where like we both reached out to like the state police based on where we thought he was to try to locate him because they were concerned. His family hadn't heard from him. We couldn't get a hold of him, nothing, right? And that's exactly what happened. Like, it still makes my hair on my arm stand up. Like it still gives me chills. What happened was the guy had a heart attack, and it was somewhere around Alabama. But thankfully, the guy had enough, at least this was what the report said, and the police told us, that like he had enough, I guess, awareness of the fact that he was having a heart attack, and he was going towards a rest area. And rather than take the truck into the rest area, he steered it into a tree, at which point in time it exploded, burned to the ground, right? Like it was a fatality. Like it was by far like the worst scenario I have ever, like, it's like still like it still makes me super upset. But it's like this stuff like happens, like it's crazy. And I mean, like this is the dangers of like being on the road in some of these things. And like still to like this day, like that one sticks with me the most because it's just like a horrible thing that like you would never want to see happen, but like it does.
Yeah, we had a fatality involved load. I don't remember. It was in the last couple of years, but it was not the driver. It was another vehicle involved. I don't remember who was at fault for it, but it was dude. You even if you did nothing that had anything to do with it, like it just
you still feel it's horrible.
It's an awful tragedy. So. Well, those are some good stories. Some good, some not so good. But hopefully everyone has a good Halloween. The Steelers do have... Unless you got any more stories, man. I kind of wanted to wrap this one up on a fun note here with a little prediction.
A little transition into the positive. Now, Steelers have a bye week this week.
Bye week. There you go. Bills have the Miami Dolphins coming to town. Tua's back in. And I didn't see how their game ended up last week. I think they lost. Yeah, they lost.
I think they did too.
28-27 to the Cardinals. But yeah, the Bills are hosting Miami. We're having like record warm weather in Buffalo for this Halloween. So like today, the high is 75. It's insane. It's never been 75 on Halloween in Buffalo. I think 73 is the previous record, and we are. It's morning time, and it's like 70 degrees already. So looking forward to it. Looking forward to a good Bills game. I'll be at drill for the Army, so I won't be able to go to the game, but I'll be tuning in mobily. Let's see, Stevens Bengals are hosting the Raiders, so our producer, the Bengals, who always heat up in the second half of the season. And we're midway through, right? We're week 9, I think now, or 8? Week 9, yeah. Midway point. So, but yeah, good stuff. We'll see how the NFL week pans out here. And what do we got? We got some good stuff coming up. I know we got some good episodes that we're going to be doing here. Let's see. Next week we have. Actually, we're going to probably be moving that one. That's the Gen Logs.
That one's going to be awesome. I'm super excited to do that one. I was talking with them actually yesterday, but like there's going to be some really good announcements on there, some really cool stuff that they're going to be announcing on our show, as well as I know that they're going to be doing, I think, an announcement with Craig Fuller at Freightwaves as well. So some really cool stuff.
Yeah, so stay tuned for that later in November. Then in 2 weeks, we're going to have Matt Perkins. He's been on before. He's going to come on and talk some of the agent risks and things to look out for if you're considering bringing agents on. Him and I can chop that up. Ben's been in the shoes of being an agent as well as having agents underneath him, so we'll have a good roundtable discussion there. But yeah, good conversation, good horror stories. Happy Halloween, everybody. Welcome to November. And any final thoughts, Ben?
Whether you believe you can or believe you can't, you're right.
And until next time, go Bills.
That wraps up this episode of Freight 360. Check out the show notes for links to anything that we've referenced on this episode. And make sure to visit us online at freight360.net to see our entire library of episodes, videos, blogs, and more.
And make sure to check us out on Facebook and subscribe to our YouTube channel for daily and weekly tips and content. And if you'd like your question answered on the show, fill out the Contact Us form on our site, and we'll see you next week.